Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Hello, America. This is the story of America, and we've got a few worries and issues to address from our congressional friends, especially from those of our Republicans. So if you entertain me for just a few moments as I go through what this decision means for our country and how it will further usher us into complete despotism. First, let me preface by saying that I do not support TikTok, nor do I use, nor have I ever used TikTok in any form. However, that does not allow me to be biased against both the social and political power of TikTok. I want to address this issue in four parts. Number one, what is TikTok? Number two, what is the threat posed by TikTok? Number three, what will banning TikTok in any form bring? And number four, what are the measured and appropriate solutions to TikTok? First, let me start by detailing the hypocrisy of Congress and all of the media pundits, along with their paramours, that being their eager sheep who attend their every word without question. The chiefest and greatest of these hypocrisies being Google, YouTube, Facebook, and other social media and big tech companies, as well as a little thing known as capitalism. Congress and the media and their media cohorts pretend to be concerned and offended by the practices of TikTok and whether or not they sell our personal data to, to China and or influence our children, all the while refusing to offer the same scrutiny to Google and other American based companies who knowingly and willingly sell our confidential data to foreign adversaries of Americans, including China and even Russia. This became further exasperated by Obama surrendering control of the internet, as well as by the massive call for the expansion of American companies to move overseas and peddling to foreign government entities, king of which is China. Let us not forget that the NBA refused to condemn China for their treatment of Muslims and Christians, and the idea that one company will be punished while others are not is a gross discrimination and abuse of power. We'll touch on this later. Now, let's get into what I was talking about here. Number one, what is TikTok? Why is it important? And why am I defending it? Well, as you all know, TikTok is a social media platform meant primarily for the uploading and subsequent viewership of mostly short form videos. It is owned by the company BitDance, which is an independent technology company that is operating from Beijing, China. As with all Chinese companies, both foreign and domestic, which include United States-based companies, the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, holds some degree of sway over what is to be shared with the Chinese government, which, as I have stated in my open, already happens voluntarily and invitingly by American-based companies and by Americans themselves. TikTok has quickly risen to be the only real competitor to YouTube, or should I say, the only real competitor to Google as a media outlet, anyways. And over 43% of young people get their news from this source. This is in addition to the fact that young people consume roughly 63% of all the news that they consume from social media companies as a whole. An attack on TikTok will be a direct violation to the First Amendment if, in fact, we are to say that Title 33 is to be applied equally to all companies. Moreover, it again underlines the gross hypocrisies of the Congress and all of the companies such as Google and Apple to sell our data and manipulate the media that we are allowed to consume, which with their discriminating algorithms and business practices to foreign adversaries. Nor has the Congress themselves dissolved themselves from their influence peddling of foreign nations, as they are all receiving money from these nations to campaign on their behalves within the halls of Congress. And I'll cover that some more in our last section. I'm going to continue going through this very quickly because I want to be able to talk ad lib about this after this is done. Now to the threat that is posed by TikTok. And this is supposedly a threat of Chinese propaganda and of data infiltration. Now, this would be a massive security threat, but this is limited to only government devices. However, as for private citizens, we voluntarily give up our rights whenever we sign up for these applications. TikTok is not the first, nor is it the most egregious example of this data breaching. The fear of Chinese influencing of the youth, when the majority of users on TikTok, or should I say over 55% of the users on TikTok, are fully grown adults between the ages of 18 to 45. This is completely asinine to say that we are at risk of brainwashing our children. Even so, this would be seen more as a failure of Congress and the present executive administration to ensure that we have a robust and accurate education system that promotes constructive and critical thinking to combat any potential brainwashing by other nations. The media, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as many in this nation are concerned, has done far worse to propagandize our youth than any foreign nation ever has, nor ever will in this country. I'll move on to my next point. Now, banning TikTok. What would be the purpose of this? Firstly, let's address this. Banning TikTok would cause significantly more harm than it would solve. The gross abuse of power and censorship of Americans would further deteriorate what little trust Americans have left in their already dwindled support of federal government. Conservatives have already been screaming of censorship and the lack of access, along with the shadow bannings on other social media companies' platforms. And the solution that Republicans decided, funny enough, that it would be a good idea to ban the only competition to Google via YouTube as the largest source of media consumption, and then blame it on an individual's rights to entertain themselves in any fashion they so desire, as well as what they choose to believe. This is akin to the internment camps that were used to arrest Japanese Americans in World War II, as well as the arresting of people during the same time period held for having different political views to the government. Now, this is shocking to me, especially considering that the movie Oppenheimer is so recent in people's memories. And as far as I'm concerned, had an accurate account and gave good summation of the predatory fear tactics that government used to cement solidarity for an ideal America. Needless to say that this is wrong. Let it be known once more again that this is in no way an endorsement nor a defense of TikTok, but rather a defense of its right to exist. Government has failed to implement its antitrust and anti-monopoly laws with the formation of the technology conglomerates such as Alphabet and Meta, which hold a monopoly over the internet, as well as the fact that Congress in several states, largely many of these Republican, have already infringed upon the freedoms of Americans by suppressing the rights to the use of the internet in ways that the government deems appropriate. Now, if you live in one of these states, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, which explains the purchasing of more and more of these virtual private networks. Now, TikTok's existence beyond government control has allowed for something to happen for the first time where it, in its existence, it is doing the job which Congress has completely removed themselves from, which is in the busting of the media control of Google, YouTube, Facebook, and other big tech companies. For years, the cries of censorships have been met with the line, and I quote, if you don't like it, then make your own platform. And then we did make our own platform in the form of Parler. And in a matter of weeks, the platform was completely erased from existence, suppressing the rights of over 70 million Americans to have an alternate place to share news and ideas. Government lobbied big tech, whom they control, to deplatform this competition. And now government seeks to break the law once again by using coercion to gain control and suppress another private entity. Now, this is the brilliant thing about being America and about being in a country that is founded on laissez-faire principle. Capitalism provided a solution where government refused to by creating competition so lucrative that it would dwindle the sales of big tech to deplatform them. If we allow for government to continue in this expansion, then we will in fact be under the tyrannical rule of mad despots seeking to usher in socialism in our country, where government becomes your parent and permits you to consume only what they allow via the parental controls. The first phase of extinguishing liberty is to control what you are allowed to say, watch, and believe. So, how do we amend this? How do we create a solution to TikTok and the ever present looming control of China, the influence of China, as we should say? Well, this is the same with practically everything else that we can solve in this country, which is to return those rights back to the individual citizens to decide for themselves, chiefly parents, to direct their children, those who will be affected by these potential threats. of TikTok, and those who already are of the age to understand, read, and comprehend the terms of service and the rights to privacy of this platform and of others, so that they are capable of making these decisions without government involvement. Americans, especially those who are old enough, which we have already discussed, that more than 55% of the people who utilize TikTok, or there are 170 million Americans who use TikTok, so think of the number. More than 55% of Americans who use TikTok are fully grown adults who have full reading, comprehensive capabilities. They know and understand the rules involved in TikTok. They know and understand the rules involved in using any social media company or actually downloading or installing any application on their phones. Every time you get an application on your phone or you download it, it tells you that you must consent to them using your cameras, your location, and they can get some of your data and use some of the data to target advertising towards you in a way that is friendly to you. They tell you all of this in their terms of service and privacy agreement, and we agree to it anyway. So I want to point this out as well. The Ninth Amendment states, and I quote, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now, this is to say that Congress does not have the power to make such a law without first amending the Constitution and doing away with these certain rights. Okay? So, Congress, if somebody were to challenge this in the Supreme Court, this would be thrown down without an amendment. An amendment requires 2/3 of both bodies of Congress in order to pass. So the solution that I pose is that we must be allowed, or should I say, the solution must be to allow Americans to choose. Every media company that we touch is already selling our data to China, and government has done nothing to stop them. And as in the Civil Rights Act, discrimination of businesses is not allowed in any form. Government can't do this. So why are they attempting to do it? I don't understand why they're attempting to do this. It doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it goes to show what they think of the American people. That the American people aren't smart enough to protect themselves. The American people aren't smart enough to read terms of service. Now, for me, I've never used TikTok. I've never downloaded TikTok. I have no interest in downloading TikTok, despite the fact that many people tell me that I should go on to TikTok to make my show blow up because it will be better for for me and my show. I have decided not to go that route because I I don't see the risk. I don't see the reward of using a platform that I don't support. But many other people do. Over 7 million businesses in the United States use TikTok as a form to advertise. Over 170 million Americans use TikTok as a form of entertainment. More than 70 million Americans use TikTok as an avenue where they consume a large portion of the news they consume. Primarily, these are young people. So I'm going to I'll get to that in the ending when I get to actually rant about this stuff and talk about it for a little bit. But moreover, I want to say this to the Republicans. Firstly, let me check here. Got some messages coming in. Let's see what we got here. Okay, nothing important. All right, let's get back to this. So moreover to the Republicans, I have to ask this question. Does your stupidity know no bounds? You've you have fallen willingly into the trap of the Democrats. Okay? Listen, young people already have an inclination to vote blue no matter who because they are ill-informed, admittedly so, and Republicans don't know how to speak to the next generation. And so while I protest the idiocy that is displayed on TikTok, I must also draw remembrance that the same idiocy is present on YouTube, Vine, Facebook, Reddit, X, and so many other social media companies. And we say nothing about it. And let's also be reminded of how Republicans lost the war on young people. Remember, it started in the 1990s when you grossly overreacted to pixels in video games. All right, remember this? In the 1990s, you guys said it was satanic for children to play Pokemon. You said it was too violent to play Mortal Kombat because a small, tiny little pixel colored red caused such outrage. When for decades on television screens and in movie theaters, it was perfectly okay to kill somebody on screen, and children had no problems being able to watch those films at the discretion of the parents, of course, who also were the ones that purchased these video games for them. But you guys uh, made an entire fool of yourselves and campaigned and created the ESRB and all of these other asinine tools and made a damn fool out of yourselves and lost the confidence and lost the votes of young people because you accused them of being too stupid to distinguish between reality and a virtual gaming peripheral when they are already able to do the same distinction watching Michael Myers kill people in Haddonfield, Illinois, or Leatherface cut somebody's skin off and make a mask out of it. Didn't seem like children went around gutting people as a result of that in the 1970s and 80s, but when the 90s came around, children became too stupid in order to do that. I also don't recall children going outside looking for turtles to jump on turtles when that's all that Mario was known for. He's the most popular, uh, largely cosplay video game character in the entire world. So there's that. But let's not also forget this as well, that kids are also subjected to in their cartoons seeing blackface in the Looney Tunes, gross violence, wartime propaganda to try to get them ready to go to war in the Looney Tunes and the old Superman comics of the 1930s and 40s. Let's not forget all of those things that happened, Tom and Jerry episode that honestly showed a depressing life for a man who lost the love of his woman, and he goes and sits on a train track waiting to be run over. But that aired on television, and everybody was okay. Everybody was okay with the honeymooners. Everybody was okay with the music of the time. But now you are fearful that children are too stupid to be able to discern from right from wrong. Can it be because government has removed parents from the equation? That's possible, but it's not government's role to play mom and dad to other people's kids. It's not government's role at all. Let parents make that decision. And so I say this to Republicans: you're foolish because you've lost this battle. The Democrats are now going to have a full ad campaign where they're going to say that Republicans are against liberty. Republicans are against freedom of speech. Republicans are against freedom of expression. Republicans are for censorship, despite the fact that Republicans cried for 3 years that the government was censoring them, and they were. But now you want to censor the very same Americans because they're using a platform that you're too old and decrepit to understand how to use. Or is it because you guys don't have control over this platform and aren't getting any money from it? Because you are getting money from Google and Alphabet, who owns Google. You're getting money from Apple, all of these companies that already pay money to China, as when these companies go to China, they're not able to uh, air certain content. They participate in censorship in China, so we already know that they can censor things. And you want them to bring that greater over here into America, where the American people are supposed to be able to consume what information that they want and come to their own conclusions. But you want to deny them the ability to do this. This is asinine. This is craziness. And so I say to Republicans again, as such, please keep your crusades to yourself and let parents make the decisions on what their children should consume and not you. Let parents have their rights over their kids back. Stop getting involved where you don't belong. And in closing, I will say this: that while I am not in agreement with the usage of TikTok, I will, however, jealously defend the right of those who do. The founding fathers and old school liberals would say that, and I quote, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And that's my closing. What do you think of my thoughts there? And my opening thoughts here. I'm going to continue speaking on this topic now because I want to bring up some more points of reference here. Now, you guys have consistently talked about this is for government to protect the American people from China. How important was it for the government to protect the people from China when the Chinese had a massive spy balloon that flew directly over the entire continental United States, including Alaska, which that balloon would have had to have journeyed more than 8,000 miles across the globe to go from China to Alaska, through Canada, down across the entire continental United States, and exiting off on the coast of South Carolina before being shot down in the Atlantic Ocean after it was able to cross our entire country for more than 7 days. But you're thinking of TikTok as a threat when China's balloon flew directly over all of our major military bases, including our nuclear power plants. How are you going to say that China through TikTok is a threat when Google sells our data to China, when Facebook coll- uh, colluded with the FBI to interfere in our election and censor credible news sources such as the New York Post, the New York Times, and other uh, news outlets to block stories that were disparaging of the Bidens? How are you going to say that China is propagandizing our young people when what our young people are espousing on TikTok is what propaganda they've learned from our secular education system, where at college and in uh, grade school, particularly high school, our kids are being turned into supporters of terror organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah. So how are we going to pit all of this on China when millions of American companies produce all of our resources from China? All of the things that we consume, we send over there to China to work in these sweat factories, and then they ship it back over here to America at an overbloated price. But we're going to pin blame on China. Now, this isn't to say that China is an ally of ours, but China doesn't have a First Amendment. China doesn't have protections of the rights to its citizens. No other country in the no other country in the world has the same rights of freedom as the United States of America does. We are the only country that has this right to protect ourselves from government by the exercise of our freedom to use our voice, to consume what we want, to believe what we want. And government does not have the right to dictate what anything that anybody can say or do. The only country in the world that has that enshrined as a part of their rights is the United States of America. So trying to compare China's ban of certain content being aired in their government to America is asinine. You can't make the comparison because China's citizens don't have the same rights that we do. We have the right to determine what it is that we want to believe. And regardless of whether I believe in the crap that happens on TikTok, the same garbage is espoused on YouTube. And we allow that. The same stuff is spewed into the brains of our children at the schools that they attend. Where now, if you take a look at the video in Oklahoma, oh, where they had children, high school age children, sucking peanut butter off their classmates' toes. And it was all set up as some type of fundraising event by these pervert teachers. Everybody there should be arrested. But this is the stuff that they're pushing on kids, that they're propagandizing on children, that they should cut their testicles off and transition over into a different sex before they're even old enough to know what puberty is all about, before they're even old enough to realize what sex they are attracted to. And we're perfectly fine with that happening in our schools, which doesn't come from China. It comes from the teachers' unions and it comes from these perverted people in the halls of Congress that are pushing this nonsense on our young people. But we are so focused on China instead of fixing the problems that are happening right here in America. Like, how foolish do you have to be to believe this garbage, to believe this nonsense? We cannot continue to allow government to expand its powers to this degree. If we continue to do this, then we will be a socialist government where the government controls everything that you say, do, breathe, and believe. And if you choose not to believe what the government tells you to do, then you will be expunged from society. There are members of Congress on the Democrat side and some even on the Republican side that are already subscribing to China's idea of a social ranking system where every person gets a rating based on how likely you are to follow the social standards and norms of the country's example. And people who have a less than A rating will be subjected to severe punishments, which includes re-education camps, which are paramount to being put in Auschwitz. Because many people in China who get put in these re-education camps do die. And you've had members of Congress on the Democrat aisle who said that we need to put Trump supporters in re-education camps here in America. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that the threat that we need to be protecting young people from isn't China. It's the ever-encroaching expansion of big government. If we do not stop this reckless madness of government expanding beyond its scope, then we will have little choice as a nation in due time to have to take back those rights from government through means of the bloodiest civil war in the history of the world. Not since Versailles has people been oppressed by a government so heavily that they would have had to go in and rebel against government and destroy them in the most vicious way imaginable. The French monarchy was devastated in the 1800s when they destroyed the people of Versailles, or should I say, in the late 1700s. George Washington would have still been president after the killing of King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette. But what I'm trying to get the point across here is, if we continue to go about things this way, we are going to be in for one hell of a ride. Something that we cannot anticipate what will come of this. I want for us to be able to have a safe and secure country. The preamble to our Constitution says that the government's duty is to provide for the general welfare of the people. And many would say that stopping China would be part of that. But need I remind you, this is the United States Constitution and other key writings by great American leaders and great American laws. And I also have a copy of the Constitution in its entirety, which includes all 25 amendments. Now, when you take a look at the legislative power of Congress, allow me to go over the duties of Congress. All the duties of Congress come after Section 7 and mostly enated in Section 8 of the Constitution. Let me read this because I know I've read this to you guys before, but I want to read this to you again so I can show you the rights that Congress has and what rights they don't have as it relates to our amendments. Listen, Section 7 of Article 1 of the Constitution. I will read. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. Every bill shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate before it become a law and be presented to the President of the United States to sign. If he approve, he shall sign it, but if not, he shall return it with his objections to the House in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on journal and proceed to reconsider it. If after such reconsideration 2/3 of the House shall agree to pass the bill, it shall be sent together with objections to the House, to the other House, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered, and if approved by 2/3 of the House, it shall become a law. But in all such cases, the votes of the House shall be determined by the yeas and nays, and the names of the persons voting for and against the bill shall be entered on the journal of each House respectively. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law, in like manner as if he had signed it, unless the Congress by their adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. Every order, resolution, or vote to which the concurrence of the Senate and the House of Representatives may be necessary, except on questions of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States, and before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him, or being disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate and the House of Representatives according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of a bill. Now on to Section 8, which delegates all of the other powers that Congress has. And I read and quote, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. To borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and within the Indian tribes, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States, to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of the foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting securities and the current coin of the United States, to establish post offices and post roads, to promote progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, to and make rules concerning captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make the rules for government and regulation on land and naval forces, to provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving the states respectively the appointment of officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become a seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the United States, in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, to make all laws which be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested in this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Those are all the powers granted to Congress. And now, as I turn page 111, I want to go over with you the First Amendment, which I caught at the beginning, but to the First Amendment, there is a preamble to the First Amendment as well. Congress of the United States began and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. The convention of the number of states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the benefits, uh, sorry, the beneficence of its ends of its institution. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America, in Congress assembled, two-thirds of both houses concurring, that the following articles be proposed as legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all of which, sorry, all or any of which articles, when ratified by three-fourths of the said legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution, viz. Articles in addition to the amendment of the Constitution of the United States proposed by Congress and ratified by the legislature of the several states pursuant to the fifth article of the original Constitution. And it says in Article 1, as I quote again, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And again, I skip over to the Ninth Amendment, which says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, meaning that Congress does not have the authority to create any law that would construe, deny, or abridge the rights of the people of the United States to their freedom of speech, freedom of press, which is the freedom to consume information in any way that they so desire. Congress does not have the power to do that. And I needed to make that known. Again, this is not a defense of TikTok. I would prefer that people would not use TikTok. But at the same time, I cannot, in good judgment, say to people, look, TikTok is stealing your data. They're going to uh, sell it to China and give all your access to China. I cannot, in good faith, tell you that that should be your reasoning for staying off of TikTok when that very principle is already happening with your usage of YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, uh, what's the Vine, all of these dating apps that people are using. You think that people don't? You think that the government doesn't see your news? You think that Google doesn't have access to that? Google has access to every picture that you've ever taken in your phone. Apple has access to everything that you have ever said in your phone. Verizon Wireless, AT&T, they all have access to everything that you've ever said, typed, or done, and they sell them in order to get advertising dollars. And heaven forbid you ever decide that you want to run for public office, because then if the money hits the right way and your opponent comes and asks this company to get dirt on you, they will then sell your private information to your political opponent so that your political opponent now has access to all of the solicit things that you have sent other people. So if you were ever online on a dating app and you were sending nudes back and forth with some person that you didn't want the worst of the world to be able to see, or you were saying something racist in joking form on Discord, or you've done anything that will be deemed inappropriate by the masses, even though they say and do the exact same things that you do, can be sold at the right price to your political opponents here in America. So to feign and pretend that the threat of TikTok is Chinese influencing of young people in this country, when the only thing that young people are espousing is what they hear from American content providers. Because the Chinese are not making the content on TikTok that young people are consuming. Americans are. So you want to stop Americans from being able to listen to and hear other Americans. That is against the law. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this little rant of mine. And if you like what I have to say, let me know. If you have a problem with what I have to say, let me know. And you know what? Maybe I'll invite you on the show and we can have a debate about it. But with that, I thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. This has been the Story of America.